Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Bill Roach, and today we're going to look at the issue of logical fallacies. And you hear people sort of sling these around all the time. They're going to say things like, "You're begging the question, how could you say such a thing?" Or "That's a straw man." And while these are true logical fallacies, unfortunately a lot of people don't use them in the proper way. For example, when you hear somebody saying something like, "You're begging the question," in that context, it usually just means I disagree with your conclusion, not that you're presupposing the conclusion of one of your premises. Or you're going to hear people say, "Well, that's a straw man," which really just means that they don't like to engage at the topic at hand, or they think that you're misrepresenting them, which is true to some degree. But we're going to look at these in greater detail. Now, one thing that I just want to encourage you is that our channel is starting to grow. People just like you are helping us out, and we don't take any donations from anyone. And I just do this as a service. Now, that might change in the future, but it's really just interesting that this channel has grown on issues related to philosophy and apologetics and theology and so much more. But all the topics we have chosen have been picked for the purpose of defending the truth, not for anything else, but for the purpose of defending the truth. We don't have any sponsors or anything else at this particular time. So diving into the topic at hand, here is our issue: how not to think. Top 5 logical fallacies. Now notice this. You're going to have a lot of books on how to think, and I'm going to deal with something on how not to think. Namely, I don't want you to use these fallacies in your day-to-day life because I want to make your life a little easier. I want you to be able to see them, interact with them, engage with them, and know how to refute them. Now, the issue is that we live in an age that's probably the most anti-intellectual age in American history. And I would say in particular, we're definitely in the most anti-intellectual age of the church. People just don't think about these issues. They don't know how to think about thinking. So what I'm going to do today is very quickly deal with 5 logical fallacies. In order to do so, what I want to do is I want to give you an example, and I call this the doctor example. Now, for many of you who are medical professionals, I'm not trying to make a blanket statement about all of them, but there's one person in particular that I think about and that I use this example of. He was an individual that I worked with at one particular time. He thought that he was smart. He thought that he knew how to think critically about things, when the fact is he is the product of contemporary education, which really means he knows a bunch of little factoid questions and answers to them and likes little trivia, but his ability to think critically, specifically about issues related to the workplace or religion or theology or society or really anything that matters, was just completely, utterly inept. Now, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying it for what it really is. That's the current state of modern education. Now, with this, the situation was this. We had 2 workers who were doing 2 different things. And worker 1 was calling out sick and never showing up to work, but doing her work when she did show up. So she'd call out, but when she came to work, she'd bust it. She'd get it done. She did a great job. Worker 2 was showing up to work, but not doing her work when she did show up. So she was physically present, but she wasn't really physically doing anything when she would get there. So here was my solution: write both of them up for not doing their job. Ask worker 1 to show up and do her work, because you're not actually doing your work if you're not there. And ask worker 2, when she is there, to do her work. So it's 2 very distinct things. Each person needs to be written up. One for not showing up, another one for not doing something when she's there. But the blanket issue is both of them are not actually doing their job. So what did we hear? What was his response? Because, he knew how to solve the situation. He cried out, "That's a contradiction. That's a contradiction. You are calling for us to do something with these people, and that's a contradiction." And I thought to myself, where in the world, where for the life of me, where on God's green earth is the contradiction? The fact is, There's no contradiction. No. A contradiction is affirming A and a non-A at the same time and in the same sense. So this would be like me saying that we need to write up worker 1 for not coming to work and doing her work, and for writing her up for coming in for doing the exact opposite at the same time in the same sense. But what I was doing is that these are two different people with two different situations that are dealing with the fundamental same issue. Namely, they're both not doing their work in two different ways and in two different senses. So here's how the whole thing ended up squaring off. One, I didn't actually point this out to him at the time because there's certain people where you don't cast pearls before swine. And the reality is that in the medical field, the field where we are the priests of all truth today, you can't ever tell them what to do. So you might as well just stop right there. Answer a fool not according to his folly. And worker 1 continued to not show up, and worker 2 continued to not do her job when she did show up. But it's a great example here of the fact that even some of the most educated people in our society can't see such a basic issue. It's not a contradiction. But the point is that logic and knowing how to think critically in these situations helps better your life, your business, your situations, or whatever, actual issue you are having to deal with. Why? Because the reality is this: if you want to fix your life, you need to do two things. You need to clean up your moral life by being born again through the Lord Jesus Christ, and you need to clean up the way you think, one, by thinking after the mind of God, thinking clearly without sin coming in and tainting what we're evaluating, and two, you do that by thinking logically. So if you clean up your moral life and you clean up the life of the mind, life gets so much easier. Unfortunately, this man still to this day doesn't get it, and I get to use him as an example every time that I think about this issue, and I get to teach logic. There you go, Jimbo. So, fallacies. What are they? What do they look like? How can we engage with them? First of all, there are formal fallacies, and these appeal to the actual form of the argument. They're almost mathematical in a sense. So it would be something like this: if A, then B, A, therefore B. And this is not a fallacy because we have if A, then B, we affirm the antecedent, and then B necessarily follows from it. However, there's a thing known as a fallacy of affirming the consequent. If A, then B, B, therefore A. And this is what's known as the fallacy of affirming not the antecedent, but the fallacy of affirming the consequent, the B in this situation. So an example of this would be, if reincarnation is true, then past life regression therapy will work. Past life regression therapy works, therefore reincarnation is true. So think about what's going on here. There are several reasons why this could be false. First of all, past experiences may be pure imagination. Two, the validity of such therapy has no causal connection to reincarnation. The issue at hand is this: the syllogism cannot handle the conclusion that's given. In particular, we don't prove reincarnation is true based off of past life regressive therapy. Now, we could flip them and say something like this: if past life regression therapy works, then reincarnation is true. Past life regression therapy works, therefore reincarnation is true. But that's flipping the two of them. It's not the same. The point is that the conclusion doesn't necessarily follow from that, because there are several counterexamples to what could be the causal force for the validity of justifying reincarnation. In other words, putting very simply, very clear, you don't prove reincarnation by proving past life regressive therapy. There's no causal connection to them. Why? Because you are affirming the consequent. However, what I want to look at today are not these fun ones, and we can look at several formal fallacies. I like the informal fallacies. And these really come down to not to the form of it, not like the mathematical structure of them, but really two basic errors in two different areas. Fallacies of ambiguity. Statements of terms are not clear, so we're not clear on what we're saying. The words aren't defined, or the propositions are vague, or fallacies of relevance. They don't actually address the issue at hand. So what I want to do is I want to look at 5 of these, the top 5 informal fallacies that I see plaguing society today. So hopefully you won't have a Jimbo experience, even though Jimbo experience was a formal fallacy, but he fell for informal fallacies all the time. I actually used to write them down. It was almost comical to me. So equivocation, definition. An equivocation occurs when the same term is used in 2 or more different senses in the course of an argument. What we have to see is that there are 3 ways to use terms. Univocally, namely they're the same, equivocally, which is different, and analogically, same meaning, maybe a different reference. So the point is that concepts can be the same, but terms can be equivocal. So let's look at this here. Pen. The word pen can be used to refer to something you write with or a place where you keep animals. The concepts are clear and distinct. Namely, we understand the thing that you write with is clearly distinguished from the place that you store animals, but our language can be the same, but used differently. And we do this all the time where we equivocate with terms. For example, someone might say, only men are rational and women are not men, therefore women are not rational. Now, guys, before you go out and start using this as a joke, stop right there. What I want you to see is this. Men is being used in a variety of different ways in this sentence. Only men are rational and women are not men. Do you see the 2 differences here? The first one is this. Only, we could change it out and say men, or the synonym is humanity. So only humanity is rational and women are not humanity? False. See how the term's being used? One is talking about the abstract noun of humanity. The second one is talking about the distinction between men and women. And then we realize that the conclusion wouldn't follow from that. Why? Because it's an equivocation. People use terms in different ways. So when you're going through and you're seeing a term used, you literally sometimes need to circle them and say, are they using them the exact same way? And if they're not, ding, 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 this is a fallacy of equivocation. Namely, it occurs when we use the same term. It might be the same word on the page, but it's understood in 2 or more different senses in the course of an argument. Now, this is not an issue of a synonym where we talk about something with a variety of different words. In fact, I heard this joke recently where this man goes in and he's going to offer his confession, and he opens the door, sits down, shuts it, and he looks up and he says, "Forgive me, Father, Vicar, Pastor, for I have synonymed." It's not something like that. It's using the same term, the actual same word in different ways. Synonyms can sometimes all get to the same concept, but if we're using our terms in ways that don't rightly reflect the same concept, that's when we have equivocated. Number 2, a straw man. Now, this is a good fallacy that people throw out there, and there's a lot of truth to this fallacy in the world in which we live. So a definition of a straw man fallacy. This occurs when a person refutes a weak, stupid, ridiculous, or patently incomplete version or completely version of the opponent's ideas rather than the one he actually holds. So instead of actually going out and dealing with the fully orbed argument that the person's actually using, you make a weaker version of it and you knock it off the table and say, look, you see how foolish this argument is? And we just boom, and we're done with it. It's the difference between dealing with a real man in a real argument with all the strength, force, and argumentation that can bring, or a straw man. The weaker version, the one that's actually not the version that's being portrayed as the actual version. In order to not fall prey to this issue, medieval debates used to require the person, because there'd be 2 interlocutors in a debate, to state the opponent's argument to the opponent's satisfaction in his or her words, just to ensure that he or she understood the view. So you would sit up there, and whatever you're debating, whether, let's just say it's something like divine simplicity, because that's been thrown around there recently, flaming straw man, and you're going to debate the actual issue. Well, the medieval theologians would have said, well, okay, I want you to lay out what do you think the actual issue is. Summarize my view, and when I say, yep, you've got it, then they felt like that was a way of overcoming the issue of a straw man. Because the whole point that we're trying to see here is that sometimes people are talking about different things and they're not actually rightly representing the opponent's argument. See, the purpose behind this approach is to easily knock down your opponent's views, but in doing so, you're not actually refuting your opponent's argument. You're refuting something else. You're not dealing with the issue at hand. And so many times this occurs, and it's a diversionary. It's an informal fallacy. It's something to actually talk about anything other than the issue at hand. So examples would be something like this. A wife says, I'd rather have a dog than a cat. And the husband says, well, why do you hate cats? Well, that's a straw man of her argument. Nowhere does she say, I hate cats. I dislike cats. I think they should be used for doorstops. I think that we should throw them out into the streets. I hate them. Get rid of them. She never says that. She just says, if I had my choice, I'd rather have a dog than a cat. But this person responds with a straw man argument. They refute this weak, stupid, irrational, ridiculously, passionately incomplete version of the opponent's idea. It's not what the person's actually claiming. Namely, it's a straw man. Or an ad hominem is another one, where you attack the person. You stupid idiots. Why would you do something like that? You fools. Why would you be so fallacious to look at an individual, you pathetic people, and attack them instead of actually attacking the argument? See the point? See what's coming about here? The definition is this, is that it's an argument directed towards the person instead of the issue. Instead of actually dealing with the issue at hand, you attack the person in some way, shape, or form, and you act like that's somehow dealt with the topic at hand. Examples are all over the place. One might be poisoning the well, attacking the trustworthiness of the person. And it would be something like this. How can you believe anything that guy says? He is so pathetic. He has never proven himself to be valid on anything. He always overgeneralizes all these different things. How could you ever believe what he says? Well, that's not actually dealing with the argument at hand. You know, the old adage, even a broken clock is right twice a day. And sometimes people who do stupid things or come from stupid places and all these different things can be right. So instead of attacking the person and poisoning the well, how about you just deal with their argument? Or another one would be this, a genetic fallacy, questioning the origin of the argument rather than the argument. It would be something like this. What do you know? You're just a teenager. You're an idiot. You haven't lived your life. But are there times when teenagers are actually correct? Is that a real argument? Or is that just a fallacious way to do away with somebody that you may disagree with? Or you'll hear things like this. It's interesting. You see it from both Roman Catholics and Protestants. You'll hear Protestants say, oh, man, we can't believe that. That comes from a Catholic source. Or you're going to hear a Catholic say, oh, man, I'm not going to believe that little individual paper pope out there, that little Protestant that's out there. Look at where that comes from, man. But the point is that we don't judge the truthfulness of something based off the origin. We test arguments. We don't use these ad hominem approaches. Or another one, the tu quoque, which is like, and you also. It's accusing your critic of the same thing rather than defending yourself against the actual criticism. And an example of this would be something like, Augustine led a wild and sexually immoral life as a youth. So what does he have to tell us about what to do and how to be saints? This is the old tit for tat argument. Hey man, how can you do this? You get on me for getting mad. Didn't you get mad that one time? You see what I'm talking about? It's the and you. Now, the interesting thing is this, is that in this, hear me when I say this, pay attention, lean forward, turn the volume up, do something, whatever you need to do, roll the window down. A argument is fallacious only if you use it fallaciously. Did you hear what I said here? An argument is fallacious only if you use it fallaciously. If you can make the case that a person is not trustworthy, that can influence an argument. Or that the source at hand is invalid, or that you can't namely charge somebody for something because sometimes you do it the same way. But the point is this, are you using it in a way that actually demonstrates the truthfulness of the premises, hence the conclusion, or invalidates one of the premises and hence invalidates the conclusion? Or are you using it as an ad hominem? There's two different ways that it can be done. And in these examples right here, ad hominem approaches are not dealing with the premises of the argument. They're attacking the person. So don't be an idiot. Don't continue doing that. Don't use ad hominem arguments when you're trying to convince somebody to do something. Or you're a fool, man. Ha ha. Laugh on 3. Or ad populum. We see this all the time. Definition. This approach appeals to the masses, the populace, the greater number of people to justify the view. How many likes you get on Twitter, how many shares you get on Facebook, how many views you get on YouTube is proof that you're right. Or the vast majority of people in the Southern Baptist Convention hold to this view. Therefore, I'm right. Or the vast majority of people that live in this world believe my exact same view as it relates to Joe's cookie mandates. Therefore, I'm true. Get my point? This approach tries to divert the discussion away from the rational consistency of the argument and any corresponding facts and evidence. Truth, what we have to see is never determined by a democratic process or by counting noses. You never just go up there and say, well, 9 people believe this and 1 person doesn't. We're going with the 9. The fact is sometimes the masses are wrong. In fact, in the greater variety of instances, a lot of philosophers would push back against what the masses are claiming and look to the philosophers for truth. I mean, for example, when you look at Plato's cave analogy, how many people are shadow dwellers? The masses. How many people are the true philosophers that have gotten out of the cave to see the true forms in and of themselves? Very, very few. The point is that you can be all alone and be right, or you can be part of the group and be wrong. Here's a few examples. Somebody might say, well, 50 million Frenchmen can't be wrong, except when they are. Or 50 million Americans can't be wrong, except, we have CNN. Or 50 million Englishmen can't be wrong. Well, I mean, that one's just self-conscious, you know what to say. Or demons. Who believes in that today? I don't know anybody that believes in a demon. The greater population of people out there don't believe in demons. What kind of fool are you? You believe in those things? Come on, man. Or medical care should be mandated. Who is to say all those doctors could be wrong? All of them. They're experts. They know what they're talking about. They've read all the literature. Who's to say all of them could be wrong? I mean, they've got the government support behind them. How could they? But the point is that these are ad populum. They are appeals to the masses, populace, greatest number of people to justify a view. Truth is that which corresponds to reality, not the mob. Or my favorite one that we're going to use today, mainly because I like saying it, post hoc ergo propter hoc, which really means after this, therefore because of this, or after this, therefore because this is caused by this, or caused by this. It's an argument that focuses on the cause of one thing from another thing. So you have an event that occurs and something else occurs after it. We're trying to say the second one was caused by the first one. Now, there are true instances of causality. Something can cause another thing. And here might be a simple way of explaining it. A is observed to have occurred before B. Therefore, it is reasonable to conclude A is the cause of B. But the issue is the temporal proximity is not a sufficient reason to conclude A is the cause of B. So, in order that we might wake up now, let's give a couple of examples. The rooster crows, A, and then the sun comes up. Is the rooster really the cause of the sun rising? The rooster may think that he is the cause of the sun rising, but is he actually the cause of the sun rising? No. Post hoc, ergo propter hoc? Nope. Mark Twain has said this. My doctor asked me whether I drank 2 hot scotches every night, and I answered him that I did, but only as a preventative of toothaches. I have never had a toothache. So, because the guy's drinking scotch, he doesn't get toothaches. Is this a post hoc ergo propter hoc? Does scotch somehow prevent toothaches? Or is he just happening to attribute the cause to it, the temporal proximity, which is not an actual sufficient condition to conclude that scotch is the cause of not having toothache? Now, scotch might be the sufficient and temporal proximal cause of hangovers or sleeping well that night, but it's not the actual cause of the toothache. Or this might be one. I wished upon a star, A, and it came true. B, therefore the reason it came true was because I wished upon a star. However, what we have to see here, wishing upon a star has no causal impact upon the world. Sorry to break your heart there. I'm just, just out here to ruin people's lives by this rational, logical thinking. I'm just a modern day Socrates, unfortunately. But the point is this. We need to know how not to think. And these are top 5 logical fallacies. And the reason I do this is because as Christians, I think we should learn how to actually think about issues. We shouldn't allow our minds to be ruled and dominated by Twitter mob mentalities. We need to evaluate the facts, think clearly, use the mind of Christ, be transformed by the renewing of our minds, and nothing less. So again, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate it. Do me one favor. Listen here before you go. Let's just talk here real quick. I need you to do one thing for me. Can you please, before you're done, like, subscribe, and share this channel? We don't have, like I've said, we don't have any sponsors. I'm not going to bow to anyone telling me what to do at this time. It's not as though I'm getting paid to do this. I'm doing it out of my own good free will for each and every one of you. And can you do me one thing? Please, like, subscribe, share, send this on, watch the video, do what you need to do to help build the Google Analytics.